presentation is from the North Texas Commission, the presentation of the Vision North Texas Initiative, and Mr. Jack Tidwell is here to make the presentation.
Thank you, sir. Again, my name is Jack Tidwell. I'm with the North Central Texas Council of Governments. I've had an opportunity to see the area grow, particularly in Euless. Telling somebody earlier, when my wife came from Austin to hunt me down, she lived in Euless, so it's always a fun time to come out and see where that took place. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the progress we've made with Vision North Texas, and a report that was recently, about 4 years ago, came out, North Texas 2050, with a tagline that I'm hoping I leave you with is for a future that's better than business as usual. Because as you'll see, some of the challenges we face are going to be quite intense, and business as usual may not be able to. I'm going to answer three questions, talk about three questions. How did we get here? What are some of those challenges that I mentioned as business as usual unfolds? And how can we do better? These are a succession of slides that indicate the developed areas in 10-year increments. And as you can tell, we have grown significantly as a region. That's a good thing. But it provides some unique challenges in terms of congestion, traffic, water supply, and in a myriad of others. We're going to talk about that right now. In terms of the 5.3 million people in 2000 to 6.5 million in 2010, you can see that they are generally in other places than Dallas and Fort Worth. And that's also a good thing. That means we're having a lot of growth over the region as a whole, but it also provides some very real infrastructure questions and challenges to respond to that as well. In terms of population projections, we're looking at a total of almost 12 million people by the year 2050, supported by 7.2 million jobs, distributed the same way we talked about before. What type of challenges does that represent? I swear I didn't cause the rain by including the raining picture of 183, but we all deal with one of the very real complications, which is traffic congestion and transportation. One of the roles that the Council of Government plays is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Transportation. And in terms of their planning, the upper left-hand corner describes the levels of congestion in kind of a ramped up pink to red flow. As you can see, by the year 2035, under kind of the business as usual, we're looking at a lot more congestion. The lower right-hand corner is even the more sobering picture, because it says even if we are able to get all the dollars we can possibly get to address congestion, that's what we're looking at, given the population and the intensity that we're anticipating in the future. That should wake everybody up in terms of their experience with transportation. Air quality is obviously going to be impacted by that, and the air quality issue, as many of you are aware, is kind of a sliding issue in terms of however the rules are being promulgated and interpreted. But on-road vehicles is a big part of the issue. That could non-attainment could cause some serious headaches in terms of transportation funding. I was talking a little bit earlier with some folks talking about my background. I'm an environmental planner by training. So projected growth in water supply is something that strikes home to me in terms of watershed management and those sorts of things. We are looking at a 2.1 billion gallon per day requirement in 2050. That would be exceeding the available water to respond to that need without some extra water coming online or a lot more conservation. A lot of components to that water conservation strategy are being talked about, and it really should be a high priority for the future discussion in North Central Texas, all the communities.
You bring up a very interesting point in your previous slide, about our water storage capability. And our efforts Department of Oklahoma, I know we really met with just basically statements of taking in the Supreme Court even, that that's not going to happen. So I'm curious that you still have Oklahoma up there. Is that discussion still going on?
The realities of that are the status of appeals, the status of where litigation and how they can sweeten that deal for both sides of the equation is still up in the air. We think that that will likely come off, depending on the population projection that Oklahoma is trying to respond to. But so far, I haven't wanted to make any declarative statements on that, certainly.
I understand. And I hopefully next time you bring back your report, you'll give us some sort of analysis. You may have another one slide, you may have coming up, but analysis on our water conservation to see how we're making an impact on the $2.1 billion number. I mean, the gallon number.
We have worked with water suppliers and purveyors throughout the region through our activities at the Council of Governments. I would be happy to come back with a more detailed description on water conservation in partnership with some of those folks.
Awesome.
In terms of stormwater and the implications of the water quality in our natural resources, the rivers and streams out there, that extra population, that extra development is going to be difficult to deal with. Communities are currently facing those challenges in terms of the stormwater permit program. Loss of open space and insufficient natural areas is going to be a very big issue in terms of it's no longer an aesthetic, it's actually acknowledging the level of water resources and other infrastructure value, say a floodplain provides, rather than having to build it artificially. And a lot of our local governments are acknowledging that value. Projected growth in electricity, as long as those two curves, the pink line is the available resources, the blue line is a firm load forecast. This has been by ERCOT. The closer those lines get together, the more we should be concerned, because extra power generation is very expensive and very time consuming. Right now we're in good shape, but we need to be aware of that into 2050. How can we do better? The North Central Texas Council of Governments on its members' behalf has partnered with UTA and the Urban Land Institute in this effort we call Vision More Texas to get this message out, to get the idea that a better educated resident decision maker is the better customer for us. We certainly want to build support for the various initiatives, but we mostly want to serve as a forum for discussion because y'all are the experts. We came up with North Texas 2050. This is a report that's been available online. It's been generated a lot of interest. The American Planning Association gave us a national award for innovation and commitment to regional planning. The vision is all about providing choice and empowering our local governments to really commit themselves to say that North Texas is recognized worldwide as a region that is economically viable and vital because it has a lot of choices and that it nurtures its innovative people, businesses, and its various natural assets. We're trying to achieve that through 12 principles of development excellence. These are very broad concepts that we are encouraging our local governments and also our other partners with Urban Land Institute and UTA to investigate what does housing choice mean. Back in the day, you would mention housing choice and it may not be a very popular thing to talk about. Given the population, the future that we face, some of these issues may be more ready for reception and constructive conversation. One of the areas that's been evolved over the past couple of years is the concept of healthy communities. Fort Worth has been a leader in their Blue Zone initiatives, and Tarrant County Health Department has been a very aggressive voice in trying to bring information to recognize how healthy our communities are and what a challenge that is going to be as the region gets older and looks different than it currently does. We've also proposed at least the concept of talking about policy areas and centers. In other words, recognizing the values that are out there and saying, do we want that into the future? And if we do, we need to have policies for our member local governments and the development community to achieve some of these concepts. We certainly think a preferred future for North Central Texas with all local governments accommodates anticipated growth. We can't build a fence. We want to offer opportunities to all the region. You know, that's a challenge, that's a unique challenge in North Central Texas. We're as urban as Dallas and Fort Worth, but we're as rural as Scurry. But we really take a commitment of serving each one of those folks in their best interest and by providing additional choices for North Central Texas. We are going to look different. School-age children are going to represent a slightly smaller share of the population in 2030. The idea of the impact of school education on the economic vitality of the community is going to change. We're going to have a smaller labor force in terms of age ranges. We're certainly going to be an older population in North Central Texas, and we're going to be much more diverse. One of the more interesting conversations that has struck me close to home is we recently took in a niece who was going to UNT. I live in Louisville, she's from South Texas, so we were kind of a transition from small town to big town. But she didn't drive. And I asked her, why not? She didn't want to. And what that anecdote has, I've been curious in finding the research, we're finding that there is a growing transit-oriented population out there where younger 16-year-olds aren't racing to go out to get a license. And that may change some of the landscape of the region in the future. We certainly want to provide and allow y'all as local government representatives, elected officials, to provide the neighborhoods, jobs, and services that your communities demand, because those demands are not going to be the same as they were in 2000. That business as usual as concept, one of our more creative speakers has said is dead. I think it was Mayor Moncrief actually said business as usual is dead. Perhaps not that dramatic, but it's going to need to be a lot more flexible into the future to meet these demands. What I'd like to do as I wrap up is to say we are trying to continue communication and build on our partnership that we've had with ULI and UTA, keep on building on the success of the Center of Development Excellence and those 12 principles by having this conversation. We want you to take this message and discuss it. If you have any questions or have folks that need to hear it as well, please let us know. We want to really call you to action because this is an issue that's not going away. And the earlier we begin to have this discussion, the more options that are certainly open to us. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you. Hopefully I didn't blow my time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
I think it's probably more of a comment than a question. You can correct me, please. The economy of the North Texas area, is it like the 16th largest economy in the world? How close am I?
I think you're very close. I don't know the exact. You're talking about Texas being like the 8th largest economy globally.
Right.
Certainly, the type of engine that's represented in North Central Texas makes up a significant part of that.
I find that extremely amazing. We've said this in the paper. We've had those reports numerous times over the last couple of years, and to sustain that growth in the future, I think that's going to be an extreme challenge, especially if you keep urban planning.
Well, in terms of the technologies and the different customer bases that are out there, I think the future is bright because we don't have a challenge like a Detroit or a Rust Belt or those folks. We have a lot of space to make some choices on, either wisely or not, and that's going to be the real challenge. When you look at the placement of infrastructure, the idea that the 50s and 60s you can kind of build your way out of a problem, build it and they will come, those dollars don't exist anymore. So some of the choices are going to be, it's not going to be rocket science, it's going to be what's available or what's possible.
And when did your wife graduate from Kennedy? What year?
What, from UNT?
Did she grew up in Euless?
No, She came from Euless. She came from Austin to move to Euless because
Okay.
I lived in Arlington and she lived in Austin, and I think she wanted to do something about that. So it's been
Sorry.
12 years of happily wedded bliss ever since. Who knew Euless was romantic? There we go.
We all know that.
You all know that, okay. Well, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to come speak to you. I'm glad the thunder didn't roll during some of my declarative statements, or I would have really been in trouble. So if there's any way we can assist you, please let us know.
Thank you very much.